Hey, peace, long life to you non-Christians. Because when the end comes, it's not what would Jesus do. You better have prayed. Jesus is what you've done. Anyway, guy was asking me a question today because he's heard a funny noise in his excavator that's actually quite common, but you just buy a machine and you're running it, and this is kind of an odd noise when it's in hot weather. Well, I couldn't hear it because it wasn't hot enough yesterday and the day before. I ran it. I went out and dug the thing and ran it back and forth and was fine. Everything sounded normal. Normal hydrostatic sound. And I know it's not hydrostatic, but the same idea. It's a axial piston pump. The same usual, how can you say it? Hertz sound from that, kind of a whine. It was all normal. Then the relief valve would sound when it went off. It's just, and what he doesn't realize, I guess I pointed it out to him but didn't connect the dots. His relief valve and all functional valves are underneath the cab, not even under the seat so much. They're right under his feet, so come right up through the floorboard for noise. However, he was just saying, can temperature make a difference? Well, possibly. And then he says, well, what should I be looking for temperatures? And I said, and I just wanted to put it on here. So you have a baseline. Now, this isn't 100% accurate, okay? This is what I've experienced over the last, 20 some years. Here we go. Under 10 tons, little machine. Okay, wait a minute. Let me back up. Okay, there's only two typical malfunctions in an excavator, in his case, with 700 hours that are common. Plugged fins, which is easy to take care of, or a bad thermostat valve, which under 10 tons isn't common. So he was looking at the gauge, and the only reason to buy a temperature gun like he's considering, unfortunately a Harbor Fake, but there it is, that'll confirm what you're reading on your gauge, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Because if your gauge only goes up to 2 bars, and this is one of the problems with the digital era, is you don't get to see those minor swings that an analog gauge would show you. What do I mean? Digital systems, actually, they pulse check. In other words, the little gauge may not even, is just the final result of what the computer reads or computer chip. Once it's powered, the computer chip and the system just samples every 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 1 second, whatever it's set for. So if there's a fluctuation like 1001, well, you can have a fluctuation within that and you'll never see it. That's why sometimes they'll go out with their digital meter and they'll tell you to go get an analog when you're working with electricity because they're looking for the blips. Now, if you have a good analog digital meter, it'll have an analog bar underneath that changes before the numbers do. That is excellent. I had two Mac meters with that, and a lot of flukes do, but not all. You have to actually look for it and pay for it. Okay, so what do we have here? He's under 700 hours. There's only 2 normal malfunctions that are typical: plugged fins or a bad thermostat valve, if it has one. So you can confirm the gauge with a temperature gun, so to speak. Under 10 tons, little machines don't often have a thermostatic valve. They're trying to keep them simpler and inexpensive, and there's not a lot of space in there for a whole nother line. Now, what's the other line for? Come back from your valve straight to the cooler, the return from the valve to the cooler. Well, if they're put in a thermostat bypass valve, that'll be in that line or connected to the cooler or connected to the valve, usually near the cooler and sometimes built into the cooler. But the line going in will tee off and go up and around the cooler or around most of the cooler. A lot of them are built in. That's when things get expensive, and that's why they tend to avoid it. If they don't build it in, it's a little more problematic when you have extra steel lines and rubber lines and fittings running around. So they try and weld it all in there. But on the small machines, quite often they don't even bother because there's so much oil. I can't say so much. There's not a lot of oil moving through small passages rapidly, so they circulate a lot faster. They just plain let it cool itself. 10-ton machines don't often have a thermal valve. Now, let's go on to another one. What's a safe oil temperature to look at? Under 180 is common. 180 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, that's once you get past 180, you start getting temperature breakdowns. In the past, some of the older excavators did run 180 to 200. Then they'd cook their oil and you had to change it a lot more often. When they brought it down, kept it cool, 180 and under is okay. The usual operating range is 120 to 140 for most oils, most machines, but not all. I had a Komatsu, we were out there in 95 and 100 degree heat digging, trying to get the thing to malfunction. I mean, we dug for 2 solid days and never got the thing over, I think, 110. So that's what I mean about the thermal valve. It may not even be in there. So, and I've seen a few older, so we got under 180, operating range 120 to 140, typical. And I've seen some of the older machines that didn't have the load sensing systems run up to 160. And that's why I gave the 180. A lot of older machines ran at higher temperatures because they were just pressure compensated. They're always under pressure. 100% of the time, it was under some kind of pressure. I mean, working pressure, not just standby or unload pressure. So where's the best place to check it? Well, on the pump inlet is where most of your sensors are because they're concerned about the oil going into the pump. It goes through your cooler, lines to the tank, sits in the tank. Now that's after it's gone through the filter into the tank, and then it has a chance to sit in there, settle out if there's anything that got through the filter, and then go back into the pump. So the critical temperature is going into the pump. So that's why I mentioned to him, well, pump inlet once it's run a good time. The coolers are too bright to check there because they're aluminum, that nice bright, even if it isn't polished, it's rough aluminum, it still doesn't matter. It'll reflect and it won't properly read. So pump outlet is going to be a higher temperature because it's under pressure. Oil under pressure heats up without ever doing anything. As will return to tank, that'll be higher because it came from the pump, went into the system, did some work, and came back. Now, it's usually not a lot higher, if at all, because sometimes you're going out through so many lines, but that's usually where a lot of friction is, so it'll build up some more heat because it's under friction and pressure. As will a return to tank. But once everything is balanced, all three temperatures usually are fairly close. Once you're working hard, you'll come into the pump at 100 degrees, and your top end may be 140, but that's relatively close. You're in a 50-degree span. I didn't mention that to him quickly, but this is just something to give you an idea that when you're looking at your construction equipment, they're all designed to have one thing in mind, to get your oil warmed up 100 to 140 degrees. 160 is kind of a top. They try and keep it down for two reasons. One of them is the rest of the system and its longevity. Because if you're reading coming into the pump 140 degrees, that wasn't 140 degrees when it was circulating the system. Okay? So that's one of the things they're trying to get through. If it comes into the pump at 140, goes out of the pump, say 160 to 180, goes through the system working and comes back at 180 to 200, you're going to start getting oil breakdown. So they're trying to manage the temperature of the oil for longevity of the machine parts, because when oil starts to break down, it gets abrasive. There's metals in there, and they're liquid metals. Now get them too hot. That's why a lot of modern hydraulic oils now, they've had to make a change to, you got it, non-zinc oils. Zinc can break down. Well, that's what they're looking to avoid. So they get longer service lives. It isn't necessarily better for the pump, because the old pumps are designed to have liquid zinc and other metals in there, copper, to act like bearings and to actually smooth out certain areas of them. There used to be a thing we had in the 80s called CLM, copper lead metals. Had copper, lead, and other metals to go in and fill in imperfections and bearings and other surfaces. Of course, you had to keep putting it in with every oil change because it only worked a certain amount of time. Well, the idea here with this oil is the same thing. And if you keep the temperature down, then the additive package in the base oil lasts longer. And that is your detergents and your other chemicals for viscosity and the liquid metals, the extra lubrication that's in that for the high stress. Now, there isn't a lot of detergents in hydraulic oil, period. So let's just get that straight. Why? Because the system is enclosed. It's not like a diesel or gas engine or anything else that has any other gases or atmosphere directly on it constantly. An engine in particular, you've got combustion. It gets by the rings. You can't get away from it. It has to be able to handle it. So the detergents are in there to keep the stuff clean, to break down what it can, to keep it moving through the engine. And that's why newer filters are so much finer, so they can capture more of that has been broken down as it goes through. You say, that's an awful mouthful. It is, but reality is reality. But I wanted you to get through the temperature when you're running your average excavator within the modern era. Let's say from, with Komatsu, I'm going to say sometime around 2004 to 5, somewhere in there where the Dash 7 series came out. Most of the 6s were similar, but you were talking in the late 90s, early 2000s. So your Dash 6s would run similar, but after that, the 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, and I'm not sure what series is out now, they all kept their oil much cooler. A PC78, PC88 running out there that we had some pump troubles with. It was a stupid problem. The vendor sent through a bad spring. It came through and met spec, but it didn't last. So you'd have a lot of 78s out there that had a problem with it. All of a sudden they just slowed down. They dig like a bandit as far as force, but that was it. No pump flow. And what it was what they call the power control, which was actually a pressure compensator. Yeah, Chris, pressure compensation. True story. And the spring would collapse, so there's nothing to compensate against. The pump was already there. Well, quite often you could just turn the adjustment and make up for it. Excuse me. Funny part of it was it was an over-center adjustment where you could go up and over. It was on a link. So you had to find the sweet spot to get that. Again, there's no room to ride the machine while it's going, so you turn a little, turn. Whoop, back up. Somewhere in here, we got it. And the others, they changed. I changed one pump for it, and there was others, they put springs in them. But usually just an adjustment took care of it. But it's a frustration. The guy just paid all this money for the machine. He's out there digging away, and you say pressure comp? Yeah. As soon as he starts to dig, arm and everything go right out, hit the ground. What in the world is this? Well, yeah. Because of pressure compensation shut the pump off. The load sensing didn't. That was, you pulled your sticks all the way, nothing happened. Because now you're onto the pressure compensating, the pressure in the system goes up, overrides your flow from your load sensing, and shuts the pump down. And those are some of the other things to keep temperatures down for, those failures on those rates. But anyway, those 78s, even when they were working beyond perfectly, cranked up there and flying, they were only supposed to be, trying to think, 4,000 pounds of pressure. We had most of them running 42 to 44, somewhere in there. And you go out, dig 95 degree down 6, 7, 8 feet in the ground, and then fill it back in. It didn't care. That oil and those things lasted well, which means everything else lasts well. That's why some of your drive lines and your hydrostatics and the final drives go bad first, because there's not much of any way to cool them down. And in some cases in the gas field, those guys were traveling 10 and 15 miles at a shot. Their seals were going out, oils were coming back with bad samples. Yeah, they were. We fixed it. That's the bizarre part. Anderson Equipment blew a cork on our branch down here. We made one change, and we didn't tell anybody about it, and that's how we got away with it. The final drives are supposed to be changed, I think, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 hours. We changed them with every engine oil change, all the way down the line. All of our final drive and final drive floating seal problems vanished unless they drove it into a swamp and sunk it there. All of them. Why? Well, because the oil's breaking down. The oil breaks down, becomes abrasive, gets into the seal, and wears the seal out because it's lost its lubricity. And not just lost its lubricity, it's gained, that's right, abrasives. So it's twofold. Not necessarily exponential, but it's twofold. 2 times the problem. So you would have thought the company would have been excited, right? we fixed a problem. And they asked, another branch called in and they said, well, they're not having a trouble and they're in the gas field. They called and asked us. We told them. They went back and told. The company went wild with anger, fury, rage. I'm like, you're kidding me. Well, this is crazy. It's expensive. I said, you've got a $500,000 machine out there you just spent $100 extra oil on. Let's get excited. You spent $200 extra oil on it for each service. Let's get thrilled and really blow it. $500 extra oil, which is way over the actual cost. And now you're not out there servicing the final drive or replacing it. And you're angry? They were not happy with me, with my response. And a couple of times I said, whoa, before you start shooting your mouth off, listen! Wait, no, you're too narrow-minded for this. What do you mean? You're looking at numbers, just dollars. That's right! Then shut up and listen to the dollars. I actually had to talk to some of these people this way. It was bizarre. Why? Elon Musk. They hired trained managers. They didn't hire trained personnel. These idiots, these morons in the upper level of Anderson Equipment had never turned a wrench in their life. And if they thought about changing the oil on their vehicle, they got the shivers because they can't do it. They take it to somebody else and have to pay for it. You know what I'm saying? Wrenches scared them. But all they saw was that dollar sign. And we're trying to convince them that, yes, we're seeing the same dollar sign, you idiot. But it's called investment. Over here, we dropped 200 of your dollars. So that over here, we could save 20,000. What do you mean? Most of the gas field machines were in the 30, 35, and 40-ton range, and occasional 50. A remanufactured final drive for a PC 300-7 excavator, reman from an aftermarket outfit with an excellent reputation, was $10,000 plus core. You hear my language? So in a 30-ton, 35-ton machine, we changed the oil, and throughout that, say, 5,000-hour period before it came back off a rent, which a lot of them got at least 5,000 on them before they came back, we saved them $20,000 by spending. And you say, yeah, that's every oil change. It is. That's a lot. And it would have been probably in the $5,000+ range. And you say, well, then, no. We saved all the labor. We saved all the downtime. All of it. So you want to start calculating that side of it? And that takes that oil cost right on down, not to zero, but it takes it down. These people were so stupid in the management of Anderson, all the way to the top, that they couldn't understand it. I want that dollar figure. I don't care. Because this dollar figure is going to cause this dollar figure. And it just got to the point where I couldn't work for people that stupid and argumentative. A company full of management narcissists. You could sit down and show them. Right there in the paper, and you could take the oil sample and show them the difference. Blow a gasket. I don't care. I want this. Hello? What are you, a stupid racehorse? Yeah. So when I'm talking oil temperatures, oils, oil changes, and I get hyped like this, there's a reason for it. Good oil, proper oil temperatures, not cold as a flounder, and obviously not baking hot, but in that proper mid-range, you keep track of that. Proper change intervals with oil samples, if you're looking at proper change intervals, because that has to change. So you do your oil sampling, your oil intervals. You can take you could take a unit like a final drive with a flaw and double its common life by keeping watch of the quality of the oil alone. and control the quality of the oil as much as you can. It's a huge difference. You got a malfunctioning EGR, malfunctioning injectors in the engines, your aftercooler's plugged. I mean, can I go through the whole list of how many different things can affect it? And if you can catch them at your oil changes and services, and if people would stop, especially in your rental fleets, if you would stop laying out prescribed times for services so that you can get all the work done. You don't want to be like that moron Will Oscarlease and some of the idiots at the former William Tom Forklift Company, where they actually sat down and said, we want it done in an hour and a half, and it was impossible for the average mechanic to barely get it done in 2. Yeah, you're going to have to shortcut some things. Just get it done in an hour and a half. But the customer got cheated, because there's certain oils that take a good length of time that takes your service into 2.5 hours. They said, well, don't worry. If you go to 2, it's okay. I went to an hour and 45 minutes. He dragged me in the office and hollered for 15 minutes. And I said, wow! I was only 20 years old at the time. I finally yelled back, you're the one that said it was okay. Well, it is okay on their part, but I don't want to see it. What? Because they start questioning me. But you're the one that, I don't care what I said before. I said, you just like yelling at people. Yeah, literally. So you people that are doing the planning out there, don't sit there and just lay it out. Have an average time that you expect them to meet. Yes, just like I said. The average service for a good mechanic that knew the forklift he was working on was 2 hours, period, bar none. What did they do? They skipped a lot of brake checks. They skipped brake adjustment checks. There's quite often, if they didn't see it immediately, they skipped hydraulic leaks. They skipped checking the final drives. They skipped checking the transmission cases and the differential cases. They skipped a lot of stuff that's high hour. In a lot of cases, they would shortchange. Sure, we pulled the plug out. Yeah, I changed oil in that unit. I did, but not all of it. They weren't lying. They just weren't telling the whole truth. But they'd make their hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes just to be able to shave in that range where they'd be able to fluff around. One guy sat there and he ran me through the list. Did you do this? Now, how am I going to tell the customer it was done? I said, because you told me not to do it. What do you mean? You told me it couldn't be done in an hour and a half, so skip these items. I skipped these items. Now you're yelling at me for it. What's your problem? Oh, yeah. That's the type of management that needs to be excised. You have to operate in a world of reality here, people. You're an owner, okay? I'm probably talking mostly to owners out there, and maybe some of you guys that are curious. And I don't talk the normal language of the managerial types, or even some field guys. Not enough F-bombs for that. There's a lot of F-bombs in the field because of the F-bombs that are in management, and that's a true story. I had 2 good managers that were young guys. Don't give me the age thing. I had 2 guys in their mid-30s. They were just fine. Oh, we go head-to-head now and then, and I just kind of look at them. And when it didn't go anywhere, I'd stop and fold my arms. And he says, you're not going to bother with me anymore. I said, nope, you're not listening. Story's over. All right, what is it? And then I tell him. He says, okay. It's your responsibility as the older mechanic to take the younger guys to listen. And if they don't listen, fold your arms and stare. And when they start asking questions and you can answer, then it's your responsibility to answer them. And on the other side, it's also your responsibility to clam up and tell them when they get after you, you're out of line, and I will no longer answer these questions. And if they start in again, let's look at fine. Dial the phone. Why? I want to talk to your boss now. Don't mess around. Don't yell, don't scream, or anything else. That's your responsibility as an older tech. Proper etiquette. And to show people how to properly behave. Call your boss now. That's why. You need to tattletale to him? Oh, no. There's no tattletaling going on. You're going to be right here in the room, and I will tell him. There will be nothing left. It's on the table. You either talk to me with respect, or I will force you to talk to me with respect. You want to fire me? Great, because you have to answer for that too. Now, are you going to straighten up and listen, or are you going to call your boss and get him down here? I did that a couple times. I looked at one of them and said, you are a 2-year-old punk out of control. When you calm down, we'll have a discussion. No, wait a minute. And I said, I ain't waiting for nothing. If you don't like it, you call your boss and drag him down here. because the next move, I will turn you over my knee and spank your backside for acting like a petulant little brat. I would have spanked my kids for when they were 4. You're what, 28? Grow up. See, that's not disrespectful. No. And he was so far out of line, it was required. Sorry, people, but pushback is required these days. You can't do that to the customer, but you can report it to the customer, write it down in your work order, and take it back to your boss. And if the boss says, well, he's going to get mad and yell at me, and says, well, you wanted the big chair there. I gave him the appropriate information. It made him angry. I tried to calm it down, and now it's your turn. And they call in, and they go nuts. And the next thing you know, you might have even just sold a job 3/4 of the time. It's never failed other than a customer that's so totally out of control you don't need him on your ledgers. In fact, one of them I diffused one time very quickly. He started yelling at me about temperatures and how much of an engineer he was and did it. I said, oh, great. Then you understand. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, I've been putting wrist pins in connecting rods for years. And I said, I understand the temperature gradient here. 5 to 550 was the best. 6 was starting to get out of line. Things start turning blue at about 650 degrees. So if I turn that nut of yours on that machine 650 degrees, or the shaft, they've just lost all of any treatment that they've ever had, haven't they? So you know as well that if we continue, it will ruin your machine. Yeah. You don't have to let them intimidate you. When there's sometimes, if you're younger and that comes to a head, just say, I'm sorry, didn't mean to anger you. Here's my phone, call my boss. I'm not calling him. Well, then I'll go back and explain it to my boss. I'm done for the day. I doubt you will be charged for the entire session. However, you need to have this settled before I can continue the work. And if you won't listen to me, then you need to talk to my boss. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Get in your truck and leave. Say, well, in some cases, you may be able to wait. I've had that a couple times where they called the boss and came back out and said, yeah, okay. But if you don't put that stop in there, they'll run over you like a Mack truck and you'll go home tired and exhausted. And you'll get a machine, if you don't push back into what you know and what's proper, that could suddenly cost the company anywhere $20,000 plus, or your customer. Just saying, you got to try. So that all came out of the hydraulic oil, because this is the stuff that escalates into trouble. And that's one of the things why the customer got a hold of me. At this point in time, he's kind of a friend. He's been around for enough years. And he wanted to know the idea because he's selling it to somebody else that he doesn't want to have a problem. So he's being a little too picky because of certain concerns that they're possible. Does he have them? I'm almost 100% certain he doesn't. But he's not 100% certain. So you give him the information that they know can work with. That's your job as the field tech. It's funny to say, you're in the field, you're an instructor, you're a hands-on teacher, you're the repairman, not a fix-it guy, and in the end, you're the PR guy that gets everything settled and on the road. In some cases, you're not, like their gas field work. Managerial types talk back and forth, and you just went and did your thing and got the heck out of there. That happens as well. But it's your responsibility in the end result to work and educate your customer. Then when you go back to the shop, strangely enough, I couldn't believe it was true, and that was one of the reasons that if somebody asked me, I changed a lot of jobs in the last years before I retired for my knees and my back. It got to be the aggravating point where every single manager, whether he was in the shop or not, all brain farted, let everything go out the window, and they were there to ride it out and acted just like managers. Every single one of them backed off, and whatever the company wanted, they'd tell whatever lie, anything. There was no one but those two that got removed from Anderson for being good people. Approved by the customers, but not approved by the company. Of endless, ignorant, narcissistic managers. They like decisive. They want to feel good. They want to hear what they want to hear. No, you're going to hear what's real. I don't know how many times I've said that line. So you got to work around that. Service managers, even if they've been in the shop, are ignorant. They let their mind blow out because they just don't want to deal with it, or number two, they're forced to blow it out of their mind by a company that's overbearing, a la Anderson. Yeah. They want what they want, and they don't care how they get it. Well, that's a company you don't want to work for. Unless you're Homer Simpson. Lie, cheat, and steal. Woohoo! I can do that.